Well, let's take a deeper look at Australia's new campaign to attract Singaporean tourists. Singapore is rebounding from record COVID cases despite high vaccination rates, prompting warnings that Australia could also be experiencing a honeymoon period before infections surge once again. But Southeast Asia correspondent Anne Barker says there'll be measures to help prevent the potential spread.
This is the first vaccinated travel lane of its kind between Australia and Singapore. Obviously, this means there will be no requirement for quarantine on either side. Travellers going to Singapore from Australia and vice versa will only have to have a PCR test to show that they're negative for COVID-19. Obviously, they'll have to be double vaccinated. And in fact, Singapore is similarly vaccinated to Australia. Now, they will only allow in direct flights from Singapore, for example. They can only go to New South Wales and Victoria, given that they're the states now that are opening their borders internationally. And it's a similar situation for Australians, obviously having to be vaccinated to go to Singapore. It will be a direct flight again. There are some stricter measures on the ground in Singapore for Australians once they arrive. People still have to wear masks outside as well as inside. There are strict limits on only 2 people, for example, eating in restaurants and cafes, unless it's 5 people from the same household. There's an alcohol curfew, for example, no more alcohol after 10 p.m. to try and get people home. And there are also other measures to do with social distancing. But apart from that, very similar measures when it comes to the actual travel.
It is interesting, though, because, of course, Australia is experiencing a drop in cases but high vaccination rates, similar vaccination rates in Singapore. Are there concerns that there will be some sort of honeymoon period, that immunity is going to wane and that could be a problem?
That's right. I mean, Singapore was one of the first countries in the world to vaccinate as highly as it's done. It's now 94% of the eligible population and something like 85% of the population overall. So it's very high. Australia, obviously, as well, in the eastern states is also high. Some Singaporeans have had 21%, I gather, of the population have also had boosters. But they are still seeing a surge in cases there. Just yesterday, there were 3,500 cases. They had their highest death toll on Tuesday with 18 people dying. Now, the problem is that even though 98% of people who are infected are either asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms, but those 2% who are seriously ill or hospitalised, there's a very large number of them who are older people in Singapore. That's not necessarily the case in Australia, where, of course, it's a younger population overall that makes up the unvaccinated cohort in Australia. So there is concern that a lot of elderly people in Singapore have chosen not to be vaccinated. And in fact, just last week, they announced that those people who choose to stay unvaccinated will now have to pay for their own hospital bills from next month if they don't get vaccinated.
And let's talk Indonesia, particularly Bali. It had been another potential tourist destination for Australians. Do we have any sense of whether that's progressing at all?
Well, look, we thought that it was going to be announced within the last month that Australia would be added to the list of currently 19 countries that are allowed to send direct flights into Bali. It's over a month now since Bali was supposedly opened up to those flights, although I should say that not one single flight has gone into Bali from a foreign country, and not one foreign tourist yet has actually booked a hotel room that we've been told. But we have been making checks every week, really, since then as to whether Australia will be added to that list, when Australia will be added to the list. It seems to have stalled, and we can't actually really get a clear answer why. There are suggestions in Indonesia that maybe there will be another surge in cases, if not soon, then certainly at the end of the year when they have a national holiday over Christmas and New Year. That is the time that cases really rise sharply in Indonesia. And it may be that they are waiting for that to happen and to pass before they do add Australia and other countries to that list. But for now, we're not getting any clear answers as to when Australians will be able to go back to Bali.
Yeah, interesting. Great to talk, Anne. Thanks so much.
Thank you.